We are going to be reviewing Flying Saucers and the Three Men. This was part of a collection of old literature that I was able to pick up very inexpensively on eBay. There's a sticker on it that it was a dollar, so it's cheaper than a candy bar. It's was on a bibliography page of a book that I was reading, which is why I made the purchase. All the other books were basically just extra pluses. The occultists had wrote that they actually use this book for cut up or cut out techniques similar to William Burroughs. They also used William Burroughs literature for cut up techniques. And this book is interesting. It was by Albert K. Bender with an introduction and epilogue by Gray Barker. I do have another work by Gray Barker as well, but this figure is pretty interesting as he was the one that started and was the president of the International Flying Saucer Bureau for many years, which was a civilian UFO investigative outfit. And then Albert K. Bender disappeared. He was a very strange man. He was into other things besides UFOs. He had said he researched the occult as well. He also was into he had a house of horrors, as you could say. He had bizarre things like bats and artificial human skulls and stuff in his house. Very strange character. Obviously, that if you walked in someone's house and they had it like decorated like a haunted house, that is a very bizarre vibe, obviously, in the house. So strange individual, no doubt. But anyways, I do think this space kind of attracts the strange like a magnet. But anyways, he encountered three men in black, as we always hear about, who were Martians, or not Martians per se. There's many different definitions of Martians, but they were alien figures, alien meaning they simply were not of the human consciousness, unless you want to take some type of time traveling interpretation. Anyways, there is a section of this book that I do want to read, as the book essentially is able to determine a couple important questions. It says, which is the why and who for these UFOs. Which I'm not saying this book has the answers, but it professes to in some way. So, anyways, he encounters the three men in black. They enter his bedroom. There's a mysterious blue glow on the floor. His radio kept turning on when he would come home. Things would be missing, almost like poltergeist activity. He found out later they travel through the radio waves. That's why the radio would always be on when he would turn home. They gave him a device, a piece of metal. He allegedly was going to show people, give it to journalists, and it got so hot he had to drop it. The way he interpreted that was that he couldn't give it to other people or show people. Am I saying this is real? No. I do think this person's potentially sincere. My little dog came to say hi. Hello, baby. But anyways, we're going to read about his encounter here with the UFO. So he's basically meditating on his bed leading up to this with the piece of metal that they had given him. And then he has an out-of-body experience. The ceiling was made of glass or some transparent substance, for I could not see what resembled a night sky with twinkling stars above. My first impression was that of being inside a flying saucer, which had landed in some secluded place. The chair was of simple design, modernistic with straight lines. It was made entirely of shiny metal. It tilted backward slightly, so that I had a full view of the area in front of me where the dais was located. Once again, I was thrown into complete darkness. I tried to rise from my chair, but I could not. Although I could move my arms and my head, I could not raise my body to a standing position. A blue light began to make itself present on the dais directly behind the tubular object. Then, out of nowhere, a wall panel slid open and someone stepped onto the dais. The panel closed. The person walked to the edge of the dais and spoke to me. His lips did not move when he spoke. He talks as well that in his other occurrences they used telepathy. He said, "Welcome to our domain. We now meet under different conditions. You are where no other earth creature has ever set foot. In this domain, you will witness things that will be most astounding to you. things that you did not know of on your planet, things that will make you disbelieve what your very eyes are witnessing. As he conveyed this message, he seemed to be using words I could speak myself, somewhat as if I were talking to myself. This is the very best way I can describe it. I could not understand everything well. I assumed this and other communications were carried out by means of telepathy. Whether it was augmented mechanically or electronically, I do not know. He continued to deliver the message. Behind me, you will see a large circular object, and if you will focus your eyes upon it, I will endeavor to tell you something about ourselves and why we are here. He made a motion with his hand, and the large circle immediately came to life, in some ways similar to a television screen. The first pictures you will see will show you the parts of the universe from which we come. We are from the reaches of your earthly telescopes, far from the reaches. With this, he motioned again, and a spectacular view appeared. It seemed that the tube had come to life, and I was actually there. It had a fluorescent appearance, yet it was full color. I could see a group of glowing objects on a dark background that appeared to be blue, yet as time seemed to go on, they turned into a velvety black. I can best describe the picture by comparing it to a 3D movie, but this was not to call it justice. Added to the stereo effect was a peculiar identity I associated with it, almost as if I were a part of the picture itself. He continued, "The view you now have on the tube is our home. It is many, many light years from your small system of planets. We are much older than your system. Far away. We were created long before the Earth or any other planets revolving about your central body. All these systems of planets and their central bodies have been formed from a central source so powerful that you could not even approach it by light year. For if you did, you would be immediately destroyed. It is a vast glowing body so immense one cannot calculate its density. It is the creator of all of us, and more families of planets are constantly being formed and thrown off into orbit. Such systems are not always perfect, and some disintegrate after a few years. We do not all revolve at the same rate of speed, and eventually some of us overtake others after billions of years. We have overtaken your system many times before, but of the years that have passed between you could never begin to conceive. Your planet was not always inhabited, although others in your system have been before you. But the years have made changes, and many civilizations have died on other bodies in your family of planets, while others are yet to be created. Most of the smaller bodies revolving about your planet were at one time part of other planets themselves, but were thrown clear away when the bodies took their ultimate shape and then cooled down. The nearest planet to Earth at one time nurtured a great civilization, which was destroyed by marauders from another system of planets in an orbit beyond ours. They will once again make their appearance in the future when they reach this same spot in their trip about the central body. Almost every system of planets that has an orbit about the central body contains some sort of intelligent inhabitant, but not all the same in body of structure, being adapted to the various conditions that exist on their peculiar worlds. Because many of these are far advanced in their way of life, your planet Earth will constantly be under surveillance by these systems as they overtake you and pass you by. Your planet is an infant as far as progress is concerned, and you have far to go to accomplish what many others in your neighboring systems have already achieved. Your planet has been disproportionately cursed in some matters, which so many do not suffer and which slow your progress. For instance, our planet has but one race and one people. Because of your many races and national group identities, there are always conflict which may result in complete destruction of your world. We have been within reach of your system for a number of years, but will soon pass beyond the point of no return. So we have found it necessary to accomplish our tasks speedily. I will briefly just mention a quick sub note here. The racial talk too, that's even mentioned there. If you think about the work of Jacques Vallée that I was just talking about, he says is very dangerous, very dangerous. And it's because this literature can be very influential on people. That's why I do want to just put a quick preface here. And I am not saying that this isn't a extraterrestrial saying this. I'm reading this just academically, and I'm certainly not endorsing everything that's said in here. And it's interesting to hear, but he does mention it is bizarre how he mentioned, if you watch the video I released yesterday, about how there's many people involved in racist cults and racist groups that then find themselves in these other cults that also bring in UFO ideology. He mentions links between some prominent members, even prominent members of the occult that are also in racist groups, who are also in groups that have to do with UFOs or have allegedly been abducted by UFOs. This is, again, if you want more information on that, that's in the video I released yesterday. I will link that video that I released yesterday at the end of this video if that's of interest to you. We have been within reach of your system for a number of years, but will soon pass beyond the point of no return. So we have found it necessary to accomplish our task speedily. We have been taking a valuable chemical from your seas. This substance is vital to our existence. So whenever we come within reach of a planet that contains such seawater, we go there and take the material without harming anyone who lives there. We process the seawater to remove this substance. It is a sticky residue that floats back to your planet in the form of long strings. In the past, we have been careless and have allowed some of this to fall upon land areas, but we now are more cautious and make certain that it returns to the sea from which it comes. And as seawater is broken down, the vital product is extracted. It is shipped immediately to our planet by spacecraft capable of speeds you could hardly imagine possible. I will mention, it is fascinating if you think about it, all the UFO videos that the DoD released and of the latest journalists. You think of George Knapp and some of the videos he just recently released, and the Navy saw these sightings out near the UFO. And if you listen to Commander Fravor, he talks about the Tic Tac, but the Tic Tac was above an object in the water, and they do appear to go into the water and out of the water. And so it is interesting that this literature from the 1950s talks about why they go into the ocean, and they're retrieving some type of substance, as it says, that's vital to their existence from the ocean. He then paused in the discourse, and with a motion of his hand, changed the picture on the tube. I saw a landmark, familiar to every American. It was the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and the area surrounding it. Again, national security risk. You wish to know why I am showing you this view. It is to inform you that we have some of our people stationed in your Pentagon while we are visiting your planet. We have them stationed in numerous places about your planet to keep us informed of all that is taking place. The next scene showed a vital spot in the United States, but unidentified as to local. It was one of our atomic stockpiles. Then continued changes of scene exhibited similar storage bases in the United States and other countries, including the Soviet Union. I asked him why he was showing this to me, and he startled me with his blunt answer. I sensed he wished to appear friendly, but his reply led me to doubt. With the push of a small button in our laboratory, we can detonate every bomb you have in your stockpile all over the globe, causing almost total destruction to your entire planet. The first thing that would come to my mind was the question, why would you do something so horrible? His reply was very blunt. Only if we were discovered and your people tried to stop us with whatever means they had at their disposal. But having looked over your planet thoroughly, we have nothing to fear in this respect. For nothing you have on Earth could harm us. Our weapons for self-destruction against marauders in space are far superior to anything you have. Then he switched to a horrifying picture that made me shudder. It depicted a hideous monster more horrifying than anything I had ever seen depicted in works of science fiction or fantasy. The monster was alive, and as I reacted in repugnance to the scene, I did not see the speaker leave the dais and started again when I noted its absence. He then seemed to be speaking from the screen itself and from the mind of the monster itself. It was as if he had instantly changed himself from the form of a man to a creature which appeared to be similar to that pictured by the West Virginia witnesses who described the Flatwoods monsters. You view me here on the screen in my normal appearance. I note you find me horrible to look upon. Yet the people on our planet do not find this horrible. We looked upon our people as odd when we first saw them evolve. We looked at your people as odd when we first saw them evolve. We watched your people develop from small sea creatures into what you are today. But if your planet continues to exist without self-destruction, your people will change in appearance over billions of years. For your atmosphere will change. It is to become thinner. Your supply of oxygen will then diminish, and you will find it necessary to exist on whatever type of air mixture you may have at that time. This and other environmental changes will lead to necessary adaptations in body structure. Continued experimentation with radioactive material will undoubtedly have effects upon future generations. This could even lead to loss of reproductive abilities, which could eventually leave your planet devoid of human life entirely. These things are ahead of you, and you must face them and solve these problems if you can. To us, your progress is of academic interest, but little more. On our planet, we have 3 sexes: female, similar to the function of yours, male, also similar to yours, and the third is neither male nor female. These latter individuals are the exalted ones who become rulers. They are few, and when they are born, there is great celebration. Our females bear eggs, which are stored away. We control our population, and these eggs are permitted to be hatched only when the great blackness covers our planet and takes many lives. The great blackness and many other things would be explained at a later date, but evidently he felt I had witnessed enough at this time, for the screen glowed bluish green and went black. Once again, he stood on the dais in human form. He then went to the sliding wall panel and as it opened, disappeared behind it. The room suddenly went into complete darkness, and I felt myself losing consciousness. Then, again, I had the feeling of being on a cloud and drifting off into space. As I held tightly to the piece of metal, the icy coldness enveloped my body. My temples throbbed, and the pain above my eyes returned with frightening sharp jabs, as if needles were being thrust through my skin. Then all movement seemed to stop, and my head cleared. I opened my eyes and found myself lying upon my bed in my own room on Broad Street. I looked up, looked about, glanced at the clock, and noticed only half an hour had elapsed. It didn't seem possible that so much could have occurred in such a short time. But it happened, and I really don't know how far I had traveled. Of the entire experience, my mind dwelled more greatly on the monster I had seen come on the screen. And yet it wasn't really a monster as we would think of the term monster. We have created pictures of monsters here on Earth, and many representations of them created them in hideous, terrifying, supernatural, and unearthly forms. The last is more likely to be correct, unearthly, but not in the fashion of our thinking. They could be terrible to look upon only because we have made them appear so to everybody, but actually they could possess an intelligence far superior to ours, such as has been the case with the person in the room of the glass dome. I opened my hand and looked at the piece of metal resting in my palm. How was I to tell anyone? I would be open to ridicule. That life would be unbearable. I had actually been transported to another place, perhaps inside of a spacecraft, as I had surmised previously. It had been accomplished in the span of half an hour. Yet I had learned so much in that length of time, and had been exposed to matters that no other person had ever seen or heard before, even in my wildest imaginations. All right, at that point, I just thought that you would find this interesting. Hope you enjoy. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Take care. Continuing on with this review, though, I do want to just mention a couple more things. An excerpt from the book. And by the way, some accused him of saying he didn't initially release this. He was going to publish it, and he decided not to because he thought people would ridicule him and think he's crazy. But keep in mind, he is the president of the IFSB, the International Flying Saucer Association, the Flying Saucer Bureau, I should say. And so, he definitely had an intention, though, to draw in more members. The membership at this time was probably between 200 to 400 people, too. So it's all relative. So it wasn't like an enormous thing either. And even when this was written in the 50s, 60s, it wasn't. The book came out in 1962. So 1950s, early 60s. 1953. So now he's saying this occurred in 1953. I was in my room. So he basically published this a decade after it occurred too, which some say gives him a little credibility. But anyways, he could have just, some say too, not had this experience and just wrote this in the 1960s as well. And, just made it up as well, saying it was from the past as well. But anyways, on a hot evening in August, I was in my room busily editing a copy for the October issue of Space Review. That was the editorial they would send out free to members once a quarter. I thought I heard a bored squeak in the attic just outside my door. I got up, went to the door to see if my stepfather might be walking about in the attic, looking for something. No light was on under the door, so I figured I had imagined the noise, until once again the odor of sulfur reached my nostrils. The odor was faint until I sat. As I did so, it became stronger. Kneeling to the floor, I discovered it was even stronger there, so I supposed it had characteristics of creeping along the floor, then rising until it reached the nostrils, because it had always accomplished a visit from this strange beings. I could expect them shortly. I puzzled myself with the question of the odor. I had never asked about it, but would make a point to do so this opportunity. I didn't know whether I should open the door and look out into the attic or wait. As the odor grew, however, I finally opened the latch, and as I did so, my heart stopped beating. When I opened the door, there stood the same figure who had sat next to me in the movie theater, following me around on the street, and had paid me a visit in my room. He motioned for me to go back into the room, for his eyes focused upon mine with the same luminescence. I thought he was alone, found I was mistaken when I saw two others directly behind me. All three came into my room and closed the door. A chill came over me as those three figures occupied the very room in which I had experienced the almost unbelievable transport of my body from one spot to another. What could they want by actually appearing in this manner? Their clothing was of a black material which reminded me of cloth used by the attire of clergymen. It was well pressed, appeared almost new. All others' apparel, such as ties, shirts, stockings, and shoes, were also black. They wore hats of Homburg style, almost like a fedora, also black. Their faces were unpleasant to look at. Their eyes shone like tiny flashlight bulbs, and the teeth were pearly white, and they had a very dark complexion. I could not see their hands, covered by black gloves. They had a bluish radiance enveloping their entire bodies, and I wondered if this was giving off the sulfuric odor. Again, I was frightened. I was scared. I waited for some move of their part, for I didn't know if I was to be treated kindly or with aggression. The figure closest to me soon settled the matter as he spoke to me in the usual manner, without moving his lips. We have come to take you to the most important meeting, and such is the distance that all of us must accompany you. Here's an image he drew of these characters. All right, figure there. You are to see our base of operations here on your planet. Please take your small metal disc. I went to the strongbox where I kept the piece of metal, took it out, held it tightly in the palm of my hand. Then, turning to the figures, I waited further development. They approached me, formed a circle about me, and for the first time, these people from another world actually touched me. They placed their hands on my shoulder, and as they did so, I felt as if I had been touched by a piece of dry ice. My whole body suddenly went numb, as I had received a giant dose of Novocaine. That was the last thing I remembered. I then opened my eyes and found myself in a large cavern. The immense size astounded me, for I had never seen such a cavern all my life. I was certain I was still on. I was not certain I was still on Earth. After the fantastic events of the past month, I would not have been surprised if I was on the moon. My three companions were still beside me as I noticed we stood on a platform made of a bright, shiny metal, reminding me of a stainless steel, and a bright beam of light shone on us from an object in front of us, but not far away. I wondered why so much light also came from above, and looked up, discovered the reason. The entire ceiling was made of ice, and light from the surface was shining through it, illuminating the cavern. It appeared as if some superhuman being had carved an enormous cavern as a human would form a hollow spot in the snow with a hot iron. A tremendous amount of heat surely had been used to create such a hideout. I had a remarkable feeling that I was still on Earth, but at a remote spot where no man would likely ever set foot. My escort noticed my keen interest in my surroundings and pointed to a metal path directly ahead of me, indicating I should take it. I walked on, and as I did so, the beam of light followed us. The path continued straight for some time, making a sharp turn to the right, and there nestled in a larger portion of the cavern loomed a huge cigar-shaped object resembling a rocket, though it was as big or bigger than one of our ocean liners. I couldn't see the other end of it from my vantage point, but noted it was constructed of similar shiny metal and contained porthole-type openings in its sides. The path led directly to a panel on the side of the enormous object. As I reached the panel, the beam of light which had accompanied us focused on a small bubble on the panel. At once it slid back, making a shrill, piercing noise. I entered, followed by the three escorts. As we did so, the panel closed behind us with the same noise. We were now in a long corridor with panels at various points along the walls. Above the panels were small glowing bubbles, some of the same colors, others varying in hue. My escort halted at one panel, and one of them removed a small cylindrical object similar to a flashlight from his clothing and shone it on a small hole in the panel. The door slid open at once. They beckoned me to step inside, and I found myself in a room that would resemble a laboratory in a chemical plant. The lab was equipped with complicated machinery, all of which seemed to be made of the same shiny metal. At many locations in the long line of tubes and coils, globular glass containers interrupted the flow of traveling liquid, which was clear like water. It was evidently heated by some means, for it was bubbling away into vapor. My impression was that of witnessing some distilling operation of gargantuan scale. At one end of the lab stood a huge instrument complex of gauges, lights, and meters. Someone sat in the panel, working levers and pushing buttons. As we approached, my three escorts stopped, and the panel operator turned to them and spoke, still without any lips moving. Although I had been able to understand all of what had been said previously, I could not grasp their communication. I knew, however, that they were conversing together. The operator retained his natural monster-like appearance, as I had seen the one on the screen in the other room. He was no taller than my escorts, but quite ugly. His outline was bulky, almost oblong, but his eyes conveyed that same glow, and when he looked at me, I could feel them burning into my very soul. I then sensed he was speaking to me. "Welcome to our base of operations here on planet Earth. You have traveled many miles to reach this spot, but the time has only been 1 second. Whereas you would require many days to reach this same spot by your conventional means of transportation. You are at a spot on your planet known as Antarctica. We have chosen this area because it is inhabited and there is no one here to disturb us in our task. We have made this base by tunneling into your ice-covered surface and burying ourselves, with only a small opening through which our smaller craft may enter and depart. The intense cold here does not disturb us, for we are not affected by your range of temperature. Our bodies acclimate themselves readily to such ranges. The surface of our home planet is barren and cold, even more intense than here on your southern polar region. Our cities are constructed underground. We have crater-like openings on the surface through which we are able to elevate spacecraft stations for takeoff and landings. When these stations are not used, they descend into the craters and the landing fields serve as cover for the openings, with only communication towers visible. I have been instructed to show you just what we are doing with your seawater, which we are taking from this surface off your planet. First, we will show you how this water reaches us. So we must go to your adjoining room. Must go to an adjoining room. Your escort will take you to this tour and then we'll return you to this room where I will explain the breakdown of water. With that, he dismissed us. My escort led me to another wall panel and again used the flashlight, causing it to slide open. We stepped through into a long, narrow tunnel that looked like a New York subway, though on a much smaller scale. We approached a small mobile unit containing seats. It was supported by a single rail, evidently was used for transportation throughout the large enclosure, which I believed to be a spacecraft. I will just briefly put in another quick footnote here. There was a YouTube channel called, I believe the YouTube channel is called like Celebrity Review. It's kind of a strange name for a YouTube channel, but it's good. It certainly has grown. I don't watch all their all their content, but I've seen like probably about 3 of their interviews with famous scientists and stuff. And there was one, he's a CIA, he's a director, not like the DNI or some like super director of it, but I want to see if I can get his name for you because he gives a testimony. Boy, maybe it was in The Unidentified Celebrity Review. That's the name of it. Let me see if I can quickly find the gentleman here. Sort by date newest. Okay. His name, okay, John Ramirez. So there is an interview with John Ramirez, CIA director. It's actually one of their most popular ones. They average like 2,000, 3,000 views. If you sort it, their activity by most views, that's going on 60,000 views. I've heard he's the real deal. The point that is significant, though, is he said that he can confirm that there are UFOs flying in and out of Antarctica. Obviously, we've also already heard the hollow Earth theory. I'm not saying that's real necessarily, but that was all based around the lore surrounding the United States when we traveled down to for Operation High Jump. And when we went to Operation High Jump, people say in Admiral Byrd's journal, he talks about UFO craft flying around Antarctica. Anyways, it's just interesting, some of these parallels. I'm skeptical about everything. I think you should be skeptical, but when you start seeing patterns, it does get a little bizarre. Of course, this guy could have read, Admiral Byrd's Antarctica content. I don't know when that was, actually. Operation High Jump occurred in 1946, 1947. So it did occur. This book was written in 1961. So it was a solid, got a clean decade in between there. So anyways, moving forward here. All right, so he dismissed him from the lab. They had a flashlight, causing it to slide open. We stepped through a long, narrow tunnel that looked like the New York subway, though on a much smaller scale. We then approached a small mobile unit containing seats. It was supported by a single rail, evidently used for transportation through the large enclosure. At their motion, I climbed into one of the seats, and they also seated themselves. No sooner were we seated than the unit sped down the track with a humming noise. A light shone from its front, and the illuminated passageway appeared. I noted many lights along the route as we speedily traversed, and gathered that these were stations along the monorail system. We came to a sudden halt and stepped onto a platform facing a panel. The escort with his door-opening device again flashed it, and we then entered a large circular room that was buzzing with activity. The wall was covered by instrument boards, before which seated operators manipulated levers and buttons. Lights flashed here and there. Fenced-off metal railings was a large circular opening in the floor. We walked to the railing, and I estimated the opening to be about 60 feet across, if not more. Looking down, I saw an elevator-like device ascending. It reached the floor level, and without halting, moved towards the ceiling. As it rose, a panel in the ceiling opened up. A large cylinder, evidently working from below, supported the platforms, which halted when it protruded through the ceiling. A large screen then lighted itself up on a nearby instrument board, and a bright dot appeared. The dot moved from one side of the screen to a point near the center, reminding me of a radar screen. The dot then glowed red and died out. From above came a vibration as if something had struck the roof. The platform then descended, and I could hardly believe my eyes when I saw what it supported as it reached the floor level. Here was my first view of a real flying saucer, and it was a foot in front of me. What a beautiful machine to look at. Completely round, with a section of portholes and a single metal rod protruding from the top of the spacecraft. It was constructed of the same shiny metal. I couldn't detect any door or panel from which occupants could emerge from, but later would be enlightened onto this point. The saucer descended through the opening into the floor until it was out of sight. My 3 escorts then took me to a round pillar about 9 feet in diameter in one section of the room. He opened a panel which closed after we stepped inside the pillar. I noticed we were in an elevator as one of the men pressed the wall button and the floor began to descend. When we stopped, the panel again opened, and we stepped out into a long tunnel of such size I could hardly believe as I was still inside the large craft. The saucer, which had just descended on the large elevator, was now just in front of us. A long tube had emerged from under the craft and was discharging what appeared to be water into funnel-like devices that sucked the liquid inward with a giant rapidity. As the eyes of one of my escorts glowed into mine, he conveyed the message that this was seawater from the surface of the earth. After the saucer had discharged its load of seawater, it moved along a track to a siding similar to the railroad yard. For many such tracks traversed this tunnel, and I rubbed my eyes when I caught sight that there were many saucers, all sitting on sidings of platform for occupants to use when entering and departing. In Earth terminology, I suppose this could be called an enormous saucer garage. The smell of sulfur lingered here, and I wondered if this odor had anything to do with the fuel that was being employed. We retraced our route, and again I found myself in the laboratory from which we had begun our tour. The monster I had previously met in the lab confronted us, and for the first time since they brought me to this strange place, all 3 escorts had departed. The monster took me to the instrument panel and pointed to a small gauge containing figures of odd appearance. From beneath the gauge, a pipe extended to the walls and the systems of cooling and tubes. This, I was told, was the point where the seawater entered the lab from large tanks below. It was sent through the tubes and coils where it was processed to obtain the product they needed. I learned not one single thing about how the process works or the nature of the final product they extracted. I hoped I might see the finished product, and I was delighted when I learned I would now have such an opportunity. He took me to an adjoining room where a huge machine occupied its center. It contained many meters, gauges, buttons, dials, and the like. The machine emitted a strange noise as 3 operators, similar in appearance to my guide, adjusted knobs and apparent switches. From the far end, this machine had a smaller conveyor in a glass tube and carried tiny blocks of compressed material, which reminded me of bouillon cubes, through the wall. I was allowed little time in this room, and no offer was made to show me anything further about the processing. I assumed that great secrecy surrounded the final disposition of the processed material, and sensed that this was a forbidden area of discussion. Once again, I was taken back to the lab, where my 3 original escorts waited for me. From their actions, I gathered my tour was not over. Again, we took a ride on the monorail system, this time stepping at a different station, but again, stepping into an elevator. We emerged into a brilliantly lit, semicircular room containing a row of chairs. The floor intrigued me, for it reminded me of tile, but each block was made of shiny metal with a hammered design, a masterpiece of workmanship like nothing I had ever seen. A large panel faced the row of chairs, and over it a large bubble glowed a deep red as we seated ourselves directly before it. One escort arose, went to a panel of buttons at one side of the panel, and pressed it. With a hum, the panel door slid open. He motioned to us, and we arose and followed him through the door, down a long hallway to yet another panel. We stopped for a few seconds, whereupon a red light glowed yet again, and the same escort again had to press a button, and then the door opened. I found myself in another semicircular room, though larger than the first. The walls were covered with glass screens of milky white appearance, similar to television picture tubes. The screens were divided by metal frameworks. In the center of the room stood a circular dais on which I noted a slanted instrument panel containing many buttons, many knobs, mounted on a metal pedestal. In front of the panel was a seat for the operator who was not yet present. We walked to the center of the room, stepped onto the dais, and sat in a half circle of seats before the panel. Immediately the room began to glow. It then turned dark. And a sliding panel facing us on the opposite walls stepped a figure glimmering in a blue haze. He was dressed in a uniform of gold. It had a golden color. His silvery white hair contrasted with the skin of light brown color. He appeared as if he might have a very heavy suntan. As he drew closer, my attention focused on his face. It had handsome features. It was almost Earth-like, contrasted to the ugliness I had observed in the other room. He was of a muscular build and was 9 feet tall. I gathered this was the Exalted One, about which I had been informed about, and this bisexual entity was in charge of the base and probably the entire planetary operation. The 3 men rose as he approached, and I did likewise. They bowed as he stepped upon the dais. Each of my escorts then took a piece of metal like mine, which I then discovered they were holding tightly in their hands, and in turn walked over to the Exalted One and pressed it to his forehead. I presumed I should do the same, and followed suit. When I touched his forehead with the metal, I felt a tingling shock go through my arm and into the temple of my head. The Exalted One sat at the operator position in front of the instrument panel, and we also seated ourselves. He turned, looked directly into my eyes, and I noticed that his eyes glue. Like those of the others, his eyes seemed to penetrate deep within me. Then he spoke to me without any lips moving. I bid you a cordial welcome to our base of operations on your planet Earth. And it is with deepest esteem that I permit you to be our honored guests because you have given so much of your time to establishing friendly relationships with visitors from space. We knew of your activities long before you tried vainly to contact us with your experiment. Prior to our personnel contact with you, we had you watch. We were merely testing your sincerity. Having proven to us you were a trustworthy person who had much willpower, you, above anyone else, were chosen to visit with us and learn of our purpose here on your planet. You have also learned many things about us. You have listened courteously without troubling us with many questions. But I am certain you have many things you would like to ask. So we are now prepared to permit you to ask any question you desire, but we must be free to decline any answer we feel free to decline. We may now hear your questions. Here indeed was the moment I had been waiting for. An invitation to satisfy my curiosity, and directed at the headman himself, the headman of the saucers of the people of Earth. How long have you been on our planet? Since the year 1945, in your length of time, he said unhesitatingly. What is your main purpose in coming to this planet? To obtain water from your vast bodies of sea. For what purpose are you using the seawater? We cannot answer that, but we have shown you what we do with it once we obtain it. Do you intend to stay on our planet long? Perhaps a period of 15 of your planet years. Do you make trips back and forth to your planet while you are here on Earth? Yes, but we have been changing our crew every 2 years. I was told that you return some of the waste material from the seawater to the sea from which it comes, but watching your process, I did not see how this was done. The waste is returned in the small craft that brought in the fresh supply. It is actually strewn while the craft is in flight. Do you intend to cause any harm to our people while you are here? We have found it necessary to frighten people, but we also have had to resort to graver actions in some cases which involve deaths among fellow Earthmen. We have carried off many of your people to our own planet for means of experimentation on them, and also to place some of them on exhibit for our own people to see. We have specimens of people from many planets, but some of them do not live. These we just simply preserve. Such has been the case of your Earth people. They have not all survived. Do you intend to take me to your planet? We would not take you to our planet unless you became an obstacle in our path. Then we might find such action necessary. Have I been an obstacle to you so far? You have not done anything to harm us, but you have delved deep into the minds of our people by your determined initiative. Why have you chosen me above some of our most brilliant men? Any person of high intellect or position in your society would not be satisfied with what we have shown or explained to them at this point. We would be inclined to keep the secret only until he was out of sight, and then would have everyone out searching for us. May I ask you some questions that have been puzzling me for many years, to which there is of course no true answer here on Earth as yet? Our scientists only surmise and guess as to these things and do not know for sure. You may ask any question you like, but I repeat, I will not answer anything that I feel I should not. The big question I wish to ask first of all, how far does space extend? This is a big mystery. You have chosen a very important question, and I feel you are clever to do so. Space, or the great void, has no end as far as we've been able to explore. And as we explained previously, there is a large main body from which all planets and their suns are formed by means of being cast off into the vast void we call space. This main body seems to grow in size and never diminishes, despite the fact that it discards new bodies constantly. It is so hot a mass, you can never go near it, even in terms of billions of your light years. All the bodies cast off it are hot, burning balls of fire, and they reach the cooler parts of space, and they then explode and form smaller bodies that circle them. These smaller bodies become planets as they cool off, but the cooling off period consumes many, many years. We have sent out spacecraft to explore the regions beyond the circling bodies, where there is an area that is deep black in which you are unable to see anything. This vast black area is waiting for bodies to fill. We have lost many of our exploring craft that went too far into the deep black and never returned. I think it would be clear if I showed you a picture that goes onto one of our screens. If you will look upon this frame of light, you will receive a better idea of what I am trying to explain. The dais revolved until we faced the lit screen. On it appeared a three-dimensional sky map, showing the large central body glowing a fiery red, twirling about, sending off balls of fire which seemed to take path around it. Many smaller solar systems revolved around the central body. So many that it was impossible to determine some of them from others. Each body was like a small speck of dust, and I suspected that many of them were thousands of times larger than Earth. Circling the edge of that screen was shown a deep, inky black, from which not a speck of light shone. This was the outer void which had no end, the region from which their people had never returned. This magnificent view vanished, and I resumed my question. Since you have explored so much of space and the bodies that are now about us, I would like to know if there is life on other planets in our own solar system. It was mentioned to you previously that at one time people existed on the planet you call the Red Planet, or Mars. They were destroyed by people from a passing planet similar to ours. They were exploited and ravaged by these visitors. The other planet nearest you is called Venus. It is covered in a shroud because it is going through a prehistoric stage similar to the one your planet experienced many years ago. Life is just beginning to develop there. Whether it will be like the life of your Earth, we do not know, but it has similar characteristics to life in your early evolution. Are there any signs of Mars that life did exist there? Yes. There are ruined cities which were masterpieces of architecture and the remains of a vast system of waterways that were used mainly for travel. When destroyed, the people did not employ air travel. Neither had they developed a technology to equal your present stage of progress. Many of these things you have told me are similar to what some of our astronomers and scientists have surmised. Are they correct in most of their assumptions? You do have many wise men and women on your planet, and they could go to great lengths with their intelligence if they would make use of it in a peaceful way, without always trying to destroy each other with horrible weapons. Are there any other inhabited planets in your system? You are the sole planet with human life in your solar system. Could a person from Earth survive on any of the other planets in our solar system? No, not without wearing special equipment. Do you think that we will ever reach our moon or reach Mars or reach Venus? Yes, you will reach your moon, but it will hold great disappointment for members of your race. If the moon is rich in minerals that we might use here on Earth, it is very rich in minerals, and I might add to that, unknown to many of your people, there is moisture in many of the craters on Moon. What caused the craters? Most of them were caused by cooling down processes when the moon was thrown from the Earth itself, but some of them were caused by large meteors which hit the face of the moon when another solar system was thrown from the central body at about the same time that your system was born. Do you believe in God? That is a creation of your people on Earth. You have strange races and colors amongst your people, and many different languages amongst these people. But it seems that all your people have had the desire to worship something like this God during their evolution. They are growing up like small children, wanting to have an anthropomorphized idea to cling to. Their belief was so great that in some cases miracles seems to have been created. These were written down for others to read, but these stories were told over and over until they are now considered to be true. What about Jesus Christ here on earth? A great believer in God with miraculous attributes of great exaggeration, he could not save himself from death, and even his own race did not believe him, yet they worship the same God. Do you not have a God on your planet? Do you worship anything? We do not worship anything, but we all know that the great central body created all of us and cast us off into space to form a life or to remain a barren piece of matter floating about. What about Jesus Christ ascending into heaven, since they could not find his body? We have studied all these things on your planet and have often thought how primitive your people appear to be. They are easily conceived of anything. They can be led by anyone who can turn their loves or hatred into directions so desired by leaders. Yours are a vulnerable people. As long as somebody leads them, they feel safe. On our planet, every person is independent of his own leader. Some may be superior in intellect, but they are merely respected and do not become leaders. In the case of your religious leader, Jesus Christ, the wisest man of all was not this religious leader himself, but the person who devised the idea to hide away or destroy his body so that for centuries afterwards people would benefit from the celebration of his birth and death of this prophet. It is best to leave many things unsaid in this area of your religion, for it is a topic which causes upheaval on your planet. Is there a life after death? On our planet, there is no life once the body is destroyed, but we are fortunate in having a lifespan 5 times your own. Some live even longer, but they are the gifted ones. We have no disease on our planet. But the thing which causes many to die is the great blackness that covers our planet when we pass a certain cluster of celestial bodies on our trips around the great central body. This has been our reason for living underground and sealing all surface openings against penetration of a strong gas which troubles us at such times. How do you account for the apparitions and ghosts that people claim to see? It will surprise you to learn that beneath the surface of your planet, far down in cavernous cities, live creatures that are able to make themselves invisible when they come to the surface. They roam the surface of your planet quite frequently and cause fright as they steal certain things which they then take back down with them. What would you say is the cause of the dreaded diseases of cancer we have on Earth? The advent of your gasoline-propelled vehicles is the main factor. Will there ever be a cure for cancer? Yes. Your learned men will develop a cure. Could you show me some scenes of life on your planet? I had hoped you would express curiosity about this, but I first wanted you to feel free to ask about your own. At this point, the light dimmed and the dais revolved, as screens about the walls lighted with scenes of life on the planet of these strange visitors. The Exalted One pressed buttons and pulled levers on the instrument panel, and I was able to see frames, as he termed them. In the first frame, you could see a view of the surface of the planet in one particular area. If you watched closely, you will see how the elevated landing field comes up from below with massive towers and elevator shafts. Many of our cities are not connected by underground passageways, and therefore major travel is carried out above the surface by small craft. He explained such frame. He kept his eyes focused upon me. My head continued to throb, and my eyes burned. Though I was fascinated by the experience, I had almost forgot the discomfort. Soon a second frame appeared. This showed an underground city. It was magnificent, lighted like daylight by some unknown source. Buildings were connected by transparent tubular roadways, supported only by the buildings they connected. Small vehicles moved in both directions in the center portions of those tubes, and people walked on both sides. The next frame depicted a building resembling a vault. An inside view showed walls containing drawers and trays. In open trays, there were objects that looked like ostrich eggs. These, I was told, were the future generations of the planet, hatched by a controlling system whenever the blackness approached and caused many deaths. I learned, too, that they were also hatched to replace any person that died off by accident. Another frame exhibited a large underground firing range where several people practiced the use of a peculiar firearm. It was silver, tube-like in device, with several buttons on the handle. As the men pressed the buttons, large fireballs shot out the end and burned through huge sheets of metal, several distances away. I was told that this was one of their weapons, but of the firing, this impressed me most. After the fireball pierced the thick metal, it would make a loop and actually return through the air and re-enter the gun from which it had been fired. The ball returned in a kind of slow motion. This evidently would recharge the tube, for once the ball returned, it would then be fired again. I asked further questions. Is this your most powerful weapon? No, it is not. We have a weapon that is even too horrible to show you. Could you tell me a little about its nature? It is a ray with a long range, which burns up anything in its path. Have you ever used this weapon in a warlike manner? Only to ward off invaders that tried to do us harm. What is the food on your planet? Do you have plants and animals? We live mainly on a fungus. It is kind of a growth similar to mushrooms. We grow many varieties of different food values. We also consume many types of shell-covered water creatures. Large plants which grow near our bodies of water bear delicious fruit. From this, we make many food products. If you have water on your planet, why is it necessary for you to take the water from our seas? The water of our planet contains no impurities. We have no water similar to your seawater, which is so rich in many different things. Would it be possible for me to write about my experiences so that others on Earth can learn of your existence? We do not want you to tell anything to anybody about what happened to you. We must keep all of this a complete secret. To date, you have done well, though your reasons for secrecy have been motivated by factors other than fear of consequences from us. As long as you possess the small piece of metal, you will be under our power. Why does my head hurt so severely when I am in the presence of you? We are able to penetrate your skull and gain complete control of your body. Is there any possible way by which you can conceive me that this is not a dream? Can you, let us say, perform some kind of maneuver or make an appearance near my home, which not only will make me realize that you actually exist, but will also demonstrate your reality to others who are skeptical? We can create an event that will prove this to you, but we do not wish you to tell others of its actual genesis. In a few days, we will send one of our small crafts to your area where it will eject a fireball which will penetrate something of little value. We will not harm anyone, although it will cause a great deal of excitement in your community. Will this occur near my home? It will be near enough to your home that you will hear about it and see the results. Suddenly the Exalted One rose, and I knew that the interview had ended. He bade me farewell, and then each of the 3 escorts approached me and pressed their metal discs to his forehead. They said I should do likewise. The Exalted One then left the room in the same manner as he had entered. The 3 men guided me back to the monorail car. We retraced our route back to the small metal ramp where we first entered the spaceship. Although I am certain the temperature must have been extremely low, I did not feel any change of temperature. I did find myself clutching the piece of the metal dome more tightly, and as I reached the pressure of it lightly, I immediately felt cold. As I released the pressure, I felt immediately cold. The metal may have been a factor in keeping me immune to the low temperature. I forgot to ask that question. As I descended a flight of metal steps towards the floor of the cavern, my 3 escorts suddenly halted me and again formed a circle around me. They held the pieces of metal to my head, and I again lost consciousness. Again, I regained my senses and was standing alone in the center of my den. The headache remained, and my eyes burned, and my feet felt swollen. I sat down on the bed, rubbed my eyes and head. Again, I wondered if I was going out of my mind. Had I suffered some type of fit? Suddenly, I realized I no longer had the piece of metal, and my fears grew. Acting on impulse, I ran to the strung box and opened it. There, at the bottom of the box, shining as before, lay the metal. I picked it up, and as I did, the pain over my eyes immediately grew intense. I replaced it in the box, and the pain then went away. I locked the box and went to my bed and lay down. As I did so, I looked at the clock and noticed it was 4 a.m. I was gone for 6 hours. Only a few hours remained before I must go to work, so I lay down and immediately fell asleep. A knocking at the door awakened me. My stepfather informed me I overslept by 20 minutes and urged me to hurry to work. As I went sleepily doing my work, the idea of having dreamed the events of the night before continued to disturb me. Then I remembered the promise I had extracted that there would be a demonstration of these visitors. The proof was not long in coming. I learned that in the morning of August 20th, a local paper carried the following story. Mystery blast shatters sign. Origin unknown. Baffles police in New Haven. The city had its first-class mystery on their hands, as there was a strange explosion at Middletown Avenue and Front Street, which tore a gaping hole in a metal signboard and brought reports of a flashing object heading towards the Rock Street at tree level. The loud blast occurred shortly after 9 p.m. Several residents of the neighborhood, attracted to their windows and doors, reported seeing the flash of the explosion and lights. Others said they saw a flashing object tear through the treetops and disappear in the direction of East Rock. The police admit they are baffled by the source of the explosion. At that point, I'm going to call it quits here. One woman claimed she saw a streak of light go by and that a smell lingered in the area, smelling like rotten eggs and sulfur. Anyways, a little bit longer of a reading than I planned, but I do find it fascinating. I hope you enjoyed. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks. Take care. God bless.